This is one of my yew plants, a beautiful evergreen conifer. It's great for hedges and for topiaries, and I plan to do both. And what makes it very nice is this plant is easy to propagate. Join me today as I show you how I get more yew plants from cuttings. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and this is an area of my garden where I planted some of the yew that I propagated last year. The process of propagating yew from cuttings takes a long time, months and months, but that's still faster than if you attempted to propagate yews from seed. In this area where I've got these 3 plants lined up, I'm planning to create a hedge, a barrier from my walkway to the rest of this garden. To get started, all you have to do is take some cuttings. I think the yew is a wonderful plant to grow, particularly if you want a hedge or if you want to shape it into topiary. Now, I've done nothing with this plant. In fact, it's been neglected completely. This is the back side of my garage, and I never do anything with these plants. Here in my Colorado Zone 5B landscape, they thrive with nothing more than the little bit of natural rainfall we get. And this plant is in full shade most of the year, but it's still giving me a lot of new growth that's perfect for taking cuttings, like this right here. I'm looking to make a cutting from this year's growth. When I trace back, I can see the brown hardwood from last year. I want to come forward of that and cut one of these semi-ripe, one of these semi-hard new growth areas to propagate for next year. I'm doing this at the very end of summer. Early fall is also a good time to take the semi-hardwood cuttings. Now, when I grab a branch, if I pull down on it, it snaps right back. That shows that this has the strength and the size that I'm looking for to make the cuttings. So I'll trace back and cut above the brown hardwood, and I'll go ahead and put it in my plastic bag. Now, I'm not going to be out here long, but it is hot and it is dry, and I do want to avoid these drying out if I can. And so I'll just do a trimming on this plant, cutting off all of these growing tips that can give me future plants, a lot of future plants. And this is about the time that you might be trimming your yew. So if you have a yew to trim, or someone else you know has a yew to trim, go ahead and grab some of the cuttings and make plants. I'll show you how to do that next. Be aware that the leaves and the stems, almost all parts of this plant, are toxic. So if you have sensitive skin, you might want to wear gloves during the propagation process. And also be aware that the yew is dioecious. You've got male plants and you've got female plants. So if you like the red berries on a yew plant, make sure you're taking a cutting from a female plant. My plants are all male. I've never seen a red berry on any of my plants. What you're doing is cloning the plant. So these male plants will be what go into my garden. I'm starting with a potting soil mix that has a base of sphagnum peat moss. To that, I've added a woody compost and perlite to ensure I have good drainage. I fill up my containers with this mix. It's important to start with a moist mix. Whether you're using the peat moss or coco coir, they're hydrophobic, so they take a long time to absorb the water. Once they absorb water, they hold on to it, but it takes a while to reach that point. The perlite adds the drainage. So the moist mix is what's going to begin encouraging the roots to develop, but I don't want these cuttings to stay in water. I don't want them to be saturated. They could lead to rotting if that happens. So a moist mix at this point is what we're placing these cuttings into. Now generally you're going to want to have a cutting that's 4 to 6 inches long. So a long piece like this, I can actually cut into 2 pieces. As I look at this, I can see some side branches that are coming off this stem. I'm going to go ahead and cut just above those branches. Now this is the central growing tip. So when I put this into the container to form the roots, it's going to tend to grow a little bit straighter. This, because it's a sub-cutting and because it has these side branches, is going to tend to be a little bit bushier. Now I'm going to remove about half of these branches. So on this piece, about the top half is leaves. Pull off a few more. On this one, same thing. Pull off all these lower branches, and about the top half is leaves. And then we're going to go ahead and encourage roots to grow along this stem. We can just place this into the growing medium, but we can't be assured that it's going to grow roots. So I want to go ahead and bruise the stem at this point. I want to damage it. That's going to encourage those roots to develop. I'll do this by scraping off the outer layer of some of this stem. Just using a knife, or in this case, the sharp blade of my pruners, I'm going to scrape the stem. And I'll do that on both of these sections, just damaging the stem. This is going to stimulate these stems to develop roots, to encourage even more roots, and to really ensure that it happens. I'm going to use some rooting hormone. I'll dip the stem into the rooting hormone along the area where I damaged it. And now I'll take these cuttings with the root hormone and place them into the prepared pots with the potting soil blend. And I'll continue doing this with all the rest of these cuttings. The long ones I'll cut in half. I'll remove any branches or leaves on the lower half. Oh, missed a step. Damage and scrape the bottom portion. It's about the bottom quarter of the stem that I'm scraping. Now I'll dip it in the rooting hormone and then into the container. For some of these cuttings that are much longer, I'm actually going to cut this into 3 pieces. I'll go ahead and cut one. This looks to be probably about 5 inches. I'll cut this one into 2. It's really bushy right here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half and make 2 pieces. One with a lot of side branches, one with just a couple, and accomplish the same results. Often when you pull off the branches, that'll be a good spot for roots to develop. So I tend to find more roots on those shorter cuttings that had the branches that I pulled off. And so scraping, and scraping, and then rooting hormone, stick in the pot, and you can see that this doesn't take much at all. When you finish putting the rooting hormone on each of these cuttings and we put them into the container, we want to make sure that we put them in all the way in so that that rooting hormone is in the pot covered with that soil. I've never worried too much about the rooting hormone coming off, but if that concerns you, you can make a hole with a pencil first. Then when you dip in the rooting hormone, you can put the cutting right into that hole. The rooting hormone is less likely to come off at that point, and then you just firm around the cutting. It didn't take long to finish this process and fill up all of these pots. So in just a few minutes, I was able to get 36 cuttings going. The next step is to water these in so that the potting mix forms around the stems and the rooting hormone. Now, the potting mix was already moist, so I'm just putting in enough water to get the mix to settle in. I want to keep this moist, but I don't want it to be saturated. And that's a common tendency that all of we gardeners tend to have, is we want to water it more when we really shouldn't. So don't let it dry out, but you don't have to water it every day. And particularly with the peat moss or the cocoa coir as that media that holds the water, it might only need to be once a week that you should water to maintain that moist condition. Check it. Go ahead and put your finger in it. Go ahead and pinch some of the soil out to see if it's drying out and whether you need to water or not. I'll put this underneath some of my grow lights that will also help stimulate the plant because they're alive right now, and these leaves will produce some photosynthesis. You don't want it to be overpowering and a hot light because that can dry it out and it can actually burn the tips. So a cool light for about 12 hours during the day is enough. It's going to take a long time for these roots to develop. 3 months is typical. So have patience. Realize that you can do this in the spring using the softwood cuttings. When you get that initial growth in the springtime, you can go ahead and cut some of those off for late spring or early summer propagation using the same methods. And I like using the potting mix because I think that helps in my environment. I have a very dry environment here in Colorado, but you can do the same thing using sand. Just a moist sand will also work to propagate the cuttings. When you use sand, you'll then need to transplant into a potting mix once those roots develop. In about 3 months, for me, it's going to probably be closer to 4, maybe even 5 months. I'll go ahead and give each of these a little bit of a tug. If there's resistance, if they don't pull right out of the soil, that means that the roots have begun to form. I'll give it another couple months and then I'll transplant into bigger pots. So it's about a 6-month, maybe even a 7 or 8 month process before these are established enough and have enough roots that you can even begin thinking about putting them outside. I'm doing this indoors. Ideally, you want the environment to be about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. My basement never gets that warm. So I've had good success at 66 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit in this air. That's why it tends to take a little bit longer for my rooting to develop, I think. With this many plants, I can expect some of them are not going to root and some of them are going to die. If I get a 50% success rate, that's pretty good. And that's about what I had last time. Then when you transplant them into your garden, you might also have some loss due to sun and animals. So from these 36, in a year, I can expect to hope to have 9, a quarter of them that are actually growing and thriving in my garden. I think that's worth the time. It's worth the wait. It's worth the effort because none of these cost me a penny. If you want to see some of the other propagation that I've done to get the plants growing in my garden, well, go ahead and watch one of these videos next. I'm Gardener Scott. enjoy gardening.